Hey guys, in this video I'll show you a 1-bar heavy attack Necromancer build, which utilizes subclassing and parses up to 122k DPS. I've tested it on a recent stream, which you can also find on my channel. The link will be in the description. For testing, we did Veteran Kind's Aegis, Veteran Hard Mode Molotov Cache, and Veteran Hard Mode The Cauldron, with me using this build. You'll also be able to find logs from these rounds in the description. This build focuses on amplifying heavy attacks with the Surgeon's Mail item set, Rakat's Void Mantle Mythic, and the Empower buff, sourced from the Might of the Guild passive, procced by constantly using Ulf's Contingency. The build is also on my website, so if you prefer written guides over YouTube videos, you can read it there instead. The link will be in the description. Starting off with subclassing. This build uses Necromancer's Gravelord, Sorcerer's Stormcalling, and Nablet's Assassination skill lines. So it can be used by characters with either Necromancer, Sorcerer, or Nablet as their base class. Necromancers can utilize the Necromancer class mastery on Bannerbearer, which isn't the top DPS option, but it's only slightly behind Cavalier's Charge, and provides additional maximum resources, which will increase your survivability. Moving on to skills. This is the base setup that will work for most situations, and which should be your starting point when making situational setups. Ulf's Contingency, with the Shock, Lingering Torment, and Force combination on it, is your source of the Empower buff, which increases damage done by heavy attacks by 70%. Since Ulf's Contingency is a Mage's Guild skill, it will trigger the Might of the Guild passive, which grants you Empower for 10 seconds. It also deals decent damage on AoE and grants you the Minor Force buff, increasing your critical damage by 10%. Ulf's Contingency is delayed until the next skill cast, but whenever it's needed, you can activate it early by bashing your enemy. If you cast this ability as you're finishing your heavy attack, the Empower you gain from it will start working just in time to boost the final tick of that heavy attack you just finished. Gravelord Sacrifice summons a skeleton which leaps at you, increasing your damage done with Necromancer abilities and dots by 15%. It's important because the channeled part of your heavy attack is considered a dot. It will also generate a corpse for detonating Siphon and trigger Gravelord passives. Merciless Resolve is an ability that will cause your light and heavy attacks to generate stacks. You can spend 5 stacks to fire a powerful arrow that also heals you if you're in melee range. It also grants you Major Salve during Prophecy. Detonating Siphon is an ability that connects you to a corpse with a tether, which deals a lot of damage over its duration and explodes at the end. It also passively increases your damage down by 3%. Bannerbearer with the Magic, Cavalier's Charge and Berserk combination on it increases your magical damage down by 6%, grants weapon damage based on your movement speed, and grants Minor Berserk. If your base class is Necromancer, you can instead use the Class Mastery signature script, which will be a slight DPS loss, but it will grant you increased survivability. You can change Berserk script to Heroism, if you can rely on your healer to provide the Minor Berserk buff. Soul Harvest is a cheap ultimate that increases target's damage taken from you by 20%. Having it slotted will also cause you to regain 10 ultimate whenever you deal a final blow against an enemy. Concealed Weapon is an ability that will passively grant us 15% movement speed, which will grant us 90 weapon and spell damage, thanks to the Cavalier's Charge script on the Bannerbearer. So that was the base setup, but now I'm gonna show you a bunch of situational skills, which you can use to tailor this base setup to specific fights. Whenever you need to slot situational skills, replace Detonating Siphon. Elemental Blockade is your source of balance, if supports aren't providing it. It requires enemies to be concussed, so you'll have to use Shock Enchant to proc it, or rely on your teammates for that. Next we have Elemental Susceptibility. Use it as your source of Major Breach, whenever you're assigned to mechanics that separate you from your group, like for example Portal in the Navintas fight, Reef Hearts in the Reef Guardian fight, Bridge in the Teleria fight, etc. Hurricane is an ability that deals decent damage, increases your weapon and spell damage to the Expert Mage passive, and grants you Major Resolve, increasing your armor. Usually, Major Resolve should be provided by your tank, but if it isn't, you can use Hurricane instead, and it's only a slight DPS loss compared to Detonating Siphon, because Hurricane itself deals really good damage. Critical Surge is a very strong heal. Use it when you need a self-heal, because you're assigned to some duty which puts you far away from your group, or if your healers are bad. It also increases your weapon and spell damage through the Expert Mage passive. Now let me show you a few other setups. This is a very easy setup with very few active abilities, which makes it so you don't have to keep track of your Empower buff, so playing it is just as easy as playing the Oakenstone Ring. Inner Light replaces Detonating Siphon. This is a setup you should use when your supports aren't providing the crucial off-balance debuff. Elemental Blockade replaces Detonating Siphon, so that you can apply off-balance yourself. Now as for rotation, I don't use a static rotation, so this is just a list of priorities. Simply recast abilities when they run out, and follow the list of priorities when there are multiple things to refresh. If you're tracking the off-balance debuff, you should cancel your heavy attack when there is around 1 to 2 seconds left on the off-balance immunity. This way, the next heavy attack you start will finish its channel during off-balance, and you'll be able to fit 3 heavy attacks during a single off-balance window. Use Offset's Contingency if your Empower is out, or if it's going to run out by the end of the heavy attack you're channeling. Use Gravelord Sacrifice when there is less than 4 seconds left on it. Use Soul Harvest whenever it's ready. Use Detonating Siphon. You only have 5 seconds until the corpse from Gravelord Sacrifice disappears, so if it's about to run out, using Detonating Siphon before the corpse expires is top priority. Use Merciless Resolve if you have at least 5 stacks, and use Offset's Contingency as a filler. And keep in mind that you can pre-buff Offset's Contingency and Gravelord Sacrifice before entering combat. Now as for passives. I am now very quickly going through all of the passives you should get on the screen. You can either pause the video or look up this list on the website guide. This is the base setup that will work for most situations and which should be your starting point when making situational setups. So Ansu's Torment, Surgeon's Mail, Rakat's Voidmantle Mythic, and 1P Slamcrow. When choosing different situational sets, you can only replace Ansu's Torment. Surgeon's Mail and Rakat's Voidmantle are too strong and too crucial for this build to ever be replaced. Ansu's Torment parses 116.1k DPS, which is only 6k lower than the top setup, which is Slivers of Nularka. But Slivers of Nularka is focused on single target damage, and unlike Ansu's Torment, it doesn't provide additional penetration from set piece bonuses. So because of that, Ansu's Torment is the most practical set. Now this is a list of situational gear. Suzan's Torment is the best set for trash packs, and for bosses that regularly spawn smaller adds. Slivers of Nularka is the best set for single target damage. Now this is a list of alternative gear, so gear that is easier to obtain and can be used while you work towards the best gear. As for crafted gear, we have Order's Wrath and Towerkill Strike. As for dungeon gear, we have Noble Duelist, and as for gear coming from PvP, we have Deadly Strike. You can use the Flame enchant instead of Shock if your supports are providing off balance. Now let me show you a bunch of examples of final setups you could end up with. This is a setup made with just crafted gear, which uses Order's Wrath, Towerkill Strike, and 2-piece Assassin's Guile for the crit chance bonus. It parses 78.6k DPS, although a huge majority of this DPS loss stems from lack of Surgeon's Mail. Next, this is a setup you should use if you don't have access to any trial gear. Noble Duelist replaces Ansu's Torment, and the setup parses 113.3k DPS. Next, this is a setup you should use if you don't have access to the Rakat's Voidmantle Mythic. Until Mirror's Construct replaces Rakat's Voidmantle and Slamcrow. And the setup parses 107.3k DPS. And this is the best setup for single target damage. Slivers of Nularka replaces Ansu's Torment. This setup parses 122.1k DPS. It will underpenetrate by 2260, which will cause a 4.52% damage loss, unless your supports provide additional penetration, which means anything beyond the usual Major Breach, Minor Breach and Crusher. Moving on to champion points. In the blue tree you want to use Weapons Expert, which increases light and heavy attack damage by 20%, Deadly Aim, which increases single target damage by 6%, Wrathful Strikes, which increases your weapon and spell damage by 205, and Exploiter, which increases damage against off-balance enemies by 10%. Replace Wrathful Strikes with Fighting Finesse if you aren't at the critical damage cap, for example because you're using light armor, or because your supports aren't providing enough buffs. In the red tree, you'll want to use Bond's Vitality, which increases your max health by 1400, Fortified, which increases your armor by 1731, Celerity, which increases your movement speed by 10%, and Rejuvenation, which increases all of your recoveries by 90. Moving on to race. The difference between best and worst race is about 5% of DPS, and there is no content in the entire game that you'll be blocked from completing because of choosing a bad race. With that said, the best races for 12-man content are High Elf and Dark Elf. The best race for 4-man content is Khajiit. Other decent options are Orc and Breton. Moving on to Mundus. You should use the Thief Mundus, which increases your critical chance. As for attributes, it's extremely simple. You should always put all 64 points into Magicka. Moving on to food. Most of the time, you should use the Artyom Pickled Fish Bowl, which increases your max health and max Magicka. Solitude Salmon Millet Soup is a cheaper alternative. For dummy parsing, you can use Tomato Garlic Chutney, which gives you only max Magicka. Moving on to potions. Use the Spell Power potions. They'll provide Major Sorcery and Major Prophecy, which are crucial buffs. You can craft them by combining Lady's Smoke, Namira's Rot, and Cornflower. Moving on to Parse. The highest Parse I've achieved using this build is 122.1k DPS, and it was using the single target setup. And you can find a link to the recording of this Parse in the description. I have also parsed 116.1k DPS using the default setup with Ansul, 113.3k DPS with Noble Duelist, 78.6k DPS with the crafted setup, 114.9k with Deadly Strike, 109k using the super easy rotation, 114.2k DPS with Stormmaster, and 107.3k DPS with Antelmir's Construct instead of Rakat's Void Mantle. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.